Hello everybody. In this C programming language tutorial, we're going to go over how to create a simple program to take user input, take a number of grades, and then compute the average. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you want to do is include your standard input and output library. To do that, just use a number symbol, type include, and then in brackets, type stdio.h. The next thing we want to do is to include our main function, and to keep it very simple, we're just going to use int main with nothing inside the parentheses, and we'll talk more about what you can put inside here in future tutorials. Then make sure that you include your curly brackets. Next, we need to create some variables that will help us store our data. We have two variables of the integer type. Here, we have a count of grades variable, and we've set that to 0. We have a count of failing grades variable. We've set that to 0. Then we have three variables of the float type. We have the individual grade variable, a total for grades variable, and an average grade variable. So we're going to use all 5 of these variables in our program here, and you'll see how each variable is used as we move forward. So the next thing we want to do is get the user input for the number of grades that will go into the average. So to start, we went ahead and created a printf statement to display the message how many grades will go into the average. Then we use a scanf function, which takes 2 arguments. The first argument is a type of string placeholder for the data that will be collected, and the second argument will be the data collected using the scanf function. We've gone ahead and put in our count of grades variable, and make sure that you put an ampersand in right before your variable, or else the scanf will not function properly. And we'll talk more about how and why and when to use the ampersand in future tutorials. Next, we need to create the code to collect the grades, and to do this we start with a for loop, and there are 3 parts to this for loop. This first part here is the start of the for loop, and we want to start at 1. The second part of the for loop is the stop, and we want to stop once we've reached the count of grades to be entered. And then this third part tells the for loop how to increment, and this shortcut syntax with the plus will increment the for loop by 1 each time through. So again, we have a start, a stop, and a step or an increment. We're starting at 1, and for example, we're using this scanf statement to collect the data for the question how many grades will go into the average, and let's just say we enter in 5, then this variable here will stop once we've reached that count. Now everything inside this for loop will execute a certain designated number of times depending on what we enter into our scanf statement. So as we mentioned earlier, if we're going to enter in 5 grades, we will be able to use this printf statement to display the message to enter in the grade for that number. Then this scanf will collect the data. And again, we have 2 arguments, the type of string placeholder, and we use a %f for a float value, which just means a type of decimal number, and then our second argument to collect the data for the individual grade, and again, remember the ampersand. This next little piece of code will create a running total for all the grades, which we will eventually use to calculate our average. And this shortcut syntax here with the plus and the equals is the same thing as typing out total grades equals total grades plus each individual grade. And what that will do is that it will take each individual grade and add it to the total grades to create a total or a running total. Next, we use an if statement, and this if statement will allow us to keep account of any grades that are considered failing, and the criteria for that is any grade less than 60. So if any grade is less than 60, we will add that to a count, which will go into the count of failing grades variable, and will be incremented using the plus anytime a grade is less than 60. Next, we need to create the code that will calculate and display the results, and to do that, we use our average grade variable, and then we take the total for grades and divide it by the count of grades. Next, we create a printf statement to display the average grade, and here we have a little string, and we have our placeholder here with a %.2f, and the f is for float, and the .2 designates the numbers after the decimal point. So this will create a decimal number with only 2 numbers after the decimal point, and then this average grade here will go into this placeholder here. And you can see this /n. Anytime you see a /n in a string like this, that will create a new line. And next we have another printf statement to display the count of failing grades if there are any. And again, we have a %d, which is the placeholder for the variable count of failing grades. So this variable data here will go into this placeholder. And another little side note, %d is the placeholder type for an integer, and you can also use a %i if you'd like. And finally, we will return 0 for a type of exit success for our main function here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run our code and test it out and see if it works. So you can see down here in our console, we get the question, how many grades will go into the average? Let's just start out simple and let's put in 2 grades. Let's put in 99 for our first grade and 100 for our second. And if we have set this up correctly, we should get 99.5. And we do. We're good to go. Let's run this again. This time, let's put in 5 grades. Okay, so let's put in a 50 and a 64 and a 77. You can see our grades are getting better. An 88 and a 101. We got a little bit of extra credit. Okay, so our average grade is 76, and you can see our count of failing grades is 1, and that's because we had 1 grade below 60, and we set that criteria here in our if statement, and there's 1 grade entered that was below 60, and that was this 50 here. Okay, let's run our code one more time, and this time let's put in 3 grades. So let's put in 110, we got a whole bunch of extra credit. A 90, and a 98. And you can see our average grade was 99.33. It's pretty good. Okay, that's all we have for this C programming language tutorial. We will be doing many more C tutorials in the near future. Join us for those, and we'll see you next time.